Hello, welcome to my channel. This is Ourielle, host of the StitchWitch Podcast. Thank you for being here. Today we are talking about reasons why knitting will be the perfect new hobby for you in 2024. Let's jump into it. Okay, before we get any hate comments, I just want to say the category is face. The category is Pat McGrath, porcelain doll Margiela runway look, Hisoka becoming like the drag queen that he really is, and Miele serving in every single YouTube video that she ever does. So before there are hate comments, just know that legally, you can't comment that if I'm giving what I'm saying that I'm giving, okay? So yes, welcome to the StitchWitch YouTube channel / podcast channel. I don't really know. We are pivoting from what was a makeup and kind of like playtime with my face channel to a knitting channel. And I thought, what better way to do this transition than give you a whole list of reasons why you should learn to knit in 2024. I have a secret agenda, and my agenda is to convert a ton of people who just like maybe knew about knitting as a hobby into like my personal knitting friends. We're gonna have a big knitting circle and our lives are gonna be so much better, and we're gonna have like this dope skill set, and we're gonna love this hobby, and we're gonna get into it together. If by some horrendous accident this has like made it into like the general public and people are clicking on for the first time and they don't know who I am, I'm so sorry. But this might be like actually a really unironically specific and useful way for you to look into a very nourishing and like wonderful hobby for you this year. I have come prepared. I have come with notes, and we are going to do this kind of shotgun style. I don't have a rhyme or reason for like why the list of items have come in the order that they've come in. I also want to say some of these like reasons or excuses to learn how to knit in the new year range from being like petty little stupid things to genuinely life-affirming, life-changing, mental health, physical health, like reasons, right? Like there's a whole plethora of wonderful aspects that have come with knitting, both big and small, and I've just tried to throw them all in here together. Hopefully this resonates with some people. I myself am a beginner. I would say maybe at best like an adventurous intermediate knitter, but I think adventurous beginner is probably the best way to describe me. I started knitting a few months ago, so late 2013, like right before the holiday season, I decided to learn knitting, and it has made my life really, really good. So here are a list of reasons to get into knitting in 2024. The first thing that I think about as someone who needs to stim, as someone who needs to deal with mental health challenges and processing my emotions and kind of like calming myself down physically, is that repetitive motion and just like knitting is therapeutic. Knitting is well known to be therapeutic as a craft just because of the slow, methodical approach, and your body kind of gets into a rhythm of doing something repeatedly. And also, I think it gives you enough to chew on intellectually so that your brain has something to work on, your body has something to work on, and then you can just kind of sit back and relax. I find I don't really have a problem with this as someone who is highly monotropic, but if you are someone who enjoys hobbies that like really suck you in, kind of wash away your sense of time because you are just like so in the moment, you're so kind of like locked in, so focused, I feel like knitting is one of those perfect hobbies. I think we are often so distracted, almost like pulled in different directions that we feel like we don't have like control over, right? If you're someone who feels like your smartphone and short form media is always like making you scroll and you're not really like in your body, you're not really able to decompress. Yeah, just the knitting and the therapy of knitting has been widely reported. Anecdotally, I also think scientifically it's been recommended, and I can tell you from my personal experience, knitting has been prescribed to me by my therapist. Like he has been very, very adamant that I need to do it for my mental health. I need to do it to kind of keep myself in check, to keep myself regulated. So if you are someone who struggles a little bit with that, definitely give it a shot. The other thing is that knitting is really functional. You can make gifts, you can make clothing in this economy when you are going outside and everything is about to fall apart in a wear or two. If you are someone who like brings clothing home from the store and you find that it's pilling, you're washing it and it's falling apart, you're finding that like it doesn't drape on you the way that you think it would, it just makes you a very like badass person to be able to understand garment construction, to be able to create something with your own two hands. I made all of my Christmas gifts last year. It was a frugal or more frugal way for me to do all the things that I wanted to do and gift them with the amount of kind of quality that I would like. So for instance, being able to knit wool mittens for people, being able to make wool scarves for people, you know, mohair sweaters are really, really expensive in the stores if you're getting like a really good quality, like high grade mohair. Those are all like I don't want to say priceless, but if you're going to try to compare prices, you're going to be dealing with something that's like maybe like $50 to $100 versus $500, $600 in the store. I cannot really explain how functional and cool it is to be able to make your own stuff. The other thing is kind of like a dopamine recovery. I mentioned this earlier, but knitting is slow if you're not aware. If you consider sewing to be constructing a garment with fabric that's pre-made, knitting also includes the step where you're constructing everything by hand, but also making the garment itself, like making the fabric itself. You know, if you're someone who like uses a loom or like a weaver, I guess like that could be a similar idea where you're like physically making the fabric and then you're making the thing that the fabric makes. So it's a really slow ass process. And I think it gives you a really in-depth and rich understanding of how much labor it takes to do something. I actually think really getting into knitting is the reason why I was able to quit fast fashion. Granted, it hasn't been like a whole year or anything like that, but I have at this point such a acute understanding of what it takes to make something, what it takes to go from point A to point B to point C, all the way down to Z when the garment is finished and like you're wearing it on your body, you're taking care of it afterwards. I just feel like because it is so slow and so intentional, every single step is something that you consider. And if you are someone who feels like you are go, 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 dopamine all the time, like as someone who is neurodivergent and has like a dopamine issue, I feel like what knitting has taught me is how to, again, like regulate my brain, calm myself down, recover from that sense of like everything I want, I can get immediately, everything I desire, you know, my feelings should always be like satisfied. And I think that is a problem that a lot of us have, but we don't know how to put our finger on it. And I feel like the common thing that everyone says is like, learn how to meditate, like be mindful, you know, take a walk and like feel your feet on the ground, which, you know, I actively do that and I enjoy that. And I definitely advocate for that kind of mindfulness. But I will say for the average person, I do think picking up a set of needles and like trying to do that might be a little bit of like an easier way to get into it, because it is, I don't know, you get something at the end of it, it like feels like you're doing something. And at the same time, just the speed and the intentionality with which you have to do stuff has really brought me closer to the process of like manufacturing and understanding and appreciation, and all that stuff is just hard to put into words, but I hope you can understand that scrolling on TikTok for 2 hours versus working on a garment that you know you are going to either wear yourself or give to a loved one, there's just, it feels like one is a better use of my time, and my brain appreciates it. The other thing is, if you are someone who like goes into an art store or like a bookstore, like, and you are looking at the markers, you're looking at the stationery, you're like, I love the spines of those like, you know, classic books, but they've been like rewrapped in this like beautiful graphic design, like fabric packaging. If you see aisles and aisles of like color-coded gel pens and you're like, oh my God, that's enticing to me, I want to introduce you to the idea of yarn stores. If you are like me and you have never really had experience with yarn stores, besides going to places like Michael's, Joann's, you know, maybe Hobby Lobby, that kind of thing, I think there's a whole world out there that is really enticing, really interesting, potentially going to blow your mind. These are knitting supply stores. So things like hanks of yarn as far as I can see, you know, beautiful notions, which are like little accessories. There are books, there are patterns, there are lovely samples of garments that people have knit up, and you can see them and you can squish them and you can feel them. People talk about like yarn being just a sensory delight. I can attest to that. It is just something so magical. You get that feeling of being like a kid in a candy shop. And I think being able to explore the local yarn stores in your neighborhood, or even traveling and getting yarn as a souvenir instead of getting like a tchotchke or like something that's going to be clutter, getting yarn is a really like nice souvenir, because you can make something with it, like a pair of socks, you can make a shawl, you can make a blanket. Yeah, being able to explore this whole new world of like tools and supplies and like skills, you know, that art supply feeling, that like potato chip feeling of like, I'm gonna try this supply next, or I'm gonna try this supply next. Like, you know, I feel like I had a lot with traditional illustration media, and now like the feeling with yarn, it's just like a whole new thing. So if you're someone who likes supplies, touching stuff, like you don't have to get into knitting to like visit a yarn store, but I highly, highly recommend it. I think it's really fun. This is another one that I feel like is a little bit like deeper. I have found knitting to be a really wonderful way to connect with the older, estranged or emotionally closed off women in my life. So I don't have a huge family, but the family that I do have, not super great with talking with words, you know, like I come from an East Asian background. So like it is unsurprising that there's not just a language barrier, but like an emotional barrier to finding commonalities and stuff. You know, there's a huge culture gap. But I find that knitting is something that a lot of and I think this is true for a lot of people. Like it's a craft that a lot of older women in particular know how to do. And this is for anyone, if you are man, boy, non-binary, woman, like whatever. I think today knitting can be for anyone, but I think historically knitting was very much so for older, or for women, right? It was like a in the home kind of craft. And, you know, in many ways it was a necessity. And I feel like being able to knit with my mother and my grandmother and to be able to understand it in like a different love language. I actually wrote a piece on this. I will link the little like essay thing that I did down below, or I'll leave it down in the down bar if anyone wants to read it. But it really taught me a lot about connecting to my own family members in a way that is historically difficult for me. Being able to kind of connect over this seemingly little thing, right? Like being able to pick yarn in a store, or like sit down together and like knit for a few hours and like not have to talk, or to like show a new technique, or to be like, hey, can you help me fix this? And there doesn't have to be a lot of language involved, and yet it is such an exchange of love. So if you happen to be in a situation where it's hard for you to make conversation with your grandparents, or, you know, you find that there's not that many things that they can relate to because they don't really understand how to use the internet, or like their, you know, information that they're getting in society is like not the same as like the information you're getting. So there's like a kind of dissonance there. See if like knitting might be a thing that you want to do or pick up with a relative. I do think it'll be really fun. I also want to say, within the same vein, building community. So as someone who, you know, like loves having community around a shared interest, I have found that the online and in-person / in-store knitting world is unlike any other online community I've ever seen. It's just very low-key. It feels the closest to like real life relationships that I've seen. And by that, I don't mean like real life as in like these are real human beings. What I mean is like real life as in organic interests that kind of bubble up and become like a part of your life in everyday aspects. I feel like the knitting world is surprisingly one that is not super focused on metrics. It's not super focused on appearances. As far as I can see, you know, the resources and the sharing and the like wealth of information that people are willing to provide out of like the charity of their own hearts is incredible. Like lifelong friends, lifelong mentors and teachers, you know, people who come together for a common cause. Like there's all of that and more in the knitting community. And I highly, highly recommend, if you're someone who is dealing with this loneliness epidemic, as I am, as many, many people my age bracket, younger and older, are dealing with, knitting might be the thing to get you out there and talking to people. And I think having a little bit of a, I don't want to say like a buffer, but because it is a thing that you're there to do, it's a little bit easier to make conversation. It's a little bit easier to be like, okay, like we're all here for this one thing, so we all know what we're going to talk about, what we're going to do, and it's like for a structured period of time. Like for me, that's a little bit easier to digest. The next one is a big one, and this is a doozy. I feel like I felt it a little bit when it came to sewing, but I approached sewing with the wrong mentality at the time. I'm hopeful to try it next year, but anyway, for this year, what I want to say is knitting has helped me develop an appreciation and an acceptance of my body where it is that does not require traditional beauty standards. And that is really hard to say without getting into a huge tangent. I might make a separate video on that later if that is interesting to anyone. But if you are making your own clothing and your own garments, I think the focus becomes less on you and like your physical appeal, maybe your marketability. Like, you know, we all have parts about ourselves that we feel insecure about. And I think a lot of those insecurities come from like mainstream media, like mainstream expectations, maybe comments that people make about you. But when you focus on knitting garments or kind of seeing how things fit on you, I think the focus goes away from the garment as like a thing that you purchase to fit you, to really being about the garment and being about like your relationship with the garment and like your relationship with a product that you developed and that you made. I don't know if it makes sense, but basically when I buy clothing, I'm looking at the clothing on me. I am the focus because I am the thing that is wearing the clothing. When I make a product and I put it on me, it's about the product because like I spent way more time on the product. And I think there's obviously going to be things that you don't like about yourself still. I'm not saying that learning how to knit a sweater is going to like solve your problems with your shoulders or like your love handles or whatever. But what I am saying is you can find like love in shaping your shoulders and like making like, you know, extra ease or like doing extra shaping for your, you know, your love handles or whatever. And like be happy that you learned how to do the technical skill. And then the product itself being excellently made is more important than like your body in it, right? And accepting that you can make things to fit your body, not the other way around. Like we talk about clothing being made to fit us and not the other way around people say, don't buy the clothing that is in the size that you want to be, buy the clothing in the size that you are. But I think when clothing is all there and pre-made, it's a lot easier to start comparing, right? It's a lot easier to be like, I'm just going to try on this other size, and then you try it on and it's too small and you like feel bad about yourself, blah, blah. When you make everything by hand, it's a lot harder to just be like, I'm going to try on a smaller size and then feel bad about it when it doesn't look good on me, right? You have to make it to your body as it is now. And then you accept that it looks good on you now because you made it to your measurements. Like you made it to yourself now. There's less judgment, I think, of the self when you are making the product. I don't know if that is a universal feeling. I can just say that for me, it has been very, very true. I feel like when the focus is on my handiwork, when the focus is on my skill set and my focus and my ability to conquer a challenge, I feel like it's taken the emphasis off of like me as like a hanger, right? Like I'm no longer just the thing that sells my looks as the sole purpose. Like actually what we're trying to do is celebrate the craftsmanship. And I think that's really fun. The other thing about knitting is that it's an intellectual challenge. I didn't write this down, but I think knitting has to be approached slightly as like an arts and science kind of thing, where it's like half art, half creativity, putting together satisfying color schemes, understanding fabric and drape, and learning about fashion in that like really, really fun technical way. But also the science of different stitches, putting something together. If you're someone who likes Legos, if you're someone who likes reading, if you're someone who is an engineer and perhaps solves problems for a living, if you're like a coder, or like someone who, if you're just someone who likes a stimulating project, I think this is perfect for you. It is like the ultimate smart girl's hobby because it's like you can be like someone who uses their brain and like do something that is really mentally challenging and stimulating and like causes you to like have to problem solve, causes you to have to like figure out your own problems, causes you to have to like struggle with mental anguish and like processing difficult emotions around problem solving and like being stuck in a stymie. But you also get something like very cool and very fashionable at the end of it. Or not. Like there are plenty of people actually out there who knit and they don't really care much about fashion whatsoever. But for me, the fashion part is very like important. It's actually really empowering. The next point, which I'm also ad-libbing right off the spot, is like you get to make stuff that people don't fucking sell in stores. Like let me tell you, it's so hard for me to shop as someone who has like a really insane body type, like crazy body measurements. Like it's just hard for me to find clothing in stores. As someone who has like a crazy sense of style, clearly, like I just can't be walking into like an Aritzia and finding what I want, right? It's really challenging to find colors that are exactly in my color season, my color preferences year round. You know, I have a very particular color scheme that I like to adhere to in my wardrobe. And if I can't find it all year round, it is hard for me to find clothing. It's hard for me to find accessories. It's hard for me to match, you know, my socks to my mittens to my headwear, right? These are things that I like to take into consideration. Hardware like buttons. If you're a fashion girly, let me tell you, if you are someone who has looked at magazines, you're watching the runway shows, you are keeping up with what's trending in fashion, you like to go to the mall, you like to go to boutiques, you're spending time in, downtown New York City, you're like shopping around on the Upper East Side. If you're that kind of person, I feel like knitting, it might be your hobby, okay? It might be your thing because there are plenty of ways to make knitting look extremely high-end, very luxurious, very expensive. If you want that like couture vibe, you want that commercial vibe, you don't necessarily want it to look like a craft, like you can do that, right? There are different ways that you can manipulate fabric to look more commercial, more professional, more tidy, that kind of thing. But also if you're like an artsy fartsy person, I feel like knitting is also cool. It's also slay because you can be so creative. You can kind of have more of like an anti-establishment bend to it as well. Like your knitting doesn't have to be conformist at all. It doesn't have to look professional. It doesn't have to look like you bought it in a store. You can make something that screams handmade and iconic and one of a kind, and no one else will have the space. It's just a really flexible way to get your creativity out. And I think it's a small daily dose of creativity. You're not necessarily all the time sitting down doing oil painting, needing to get like your whole thing out. It's a low barrier to entry, which is also one of my favorite things about it. You need a pair of needles and you need a yarn and a project that you want to do, and that's it. And everything you do after that, you build, and there's like little things you can get, like you need stitch markers, and you might need to use a pattern or like a tutorial or something like that. But generally, it's a very, very low cost to entry and low cost to continue doing. It is a great way to fill your time when you are not wanting to be on your phone all the time, be on that damn phone. Like when I need to take a little break and I don't want to be on my phone, I think there are a few hobbies that I think contribute to my self-care and my ability to not be like so sucked in with the social media grind. I think plenty of people around me in my personal life are always talking about how you know, they feel like they're not doing anything with their lives. You know, like they go to work and then they come home and they're on social media all day, and it's like, God, like TikTok or shorts, like they're just sucking me in, and I lose hours of my day. And there are people who read, like I have a little Kindle. There are people who do journaling, like I do journaling as well. Those are all things that really help. But a lot of the other self-care hobbies we do, like cooking, like, you know, exercise, like spending time on a date with our friends and family and, you know, our loved ones, those are like big chunks of time that you need to like allocate. Or for me, like spiritual stuff, like going into ritual work, that takes like a few hours. But knitting can be like 2 minutes. It can be something you do, you know, when you're on your 30-minute lunch break and you finish your lunch in the first 15 minutes, you have 15 minutes left. Are you going to be mindlessly scrolling, or are you going to work on the sock that you were making? Because you get perfectly beautiful, fit to your feet socks for the cost of like a polyester sock at Target. I kid you not. I bought 3 pairs of socks at Target, and they were labeled as wool blend because I was, I think, doing some snow sport or something. I was going somewhere cold, and I bought these socks, and they were $15 a pair, and they were 20% wool. Like, that's ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous in this economy. But yeah, it's a non-electronic related hobby that doesn't necessarily like overfill your mind with dopamine all the time. I feel like it's really cannot be understated how much I have replaced kind of like small mindless scrolling with intentional activity. I'm not saying scrolling is bad. I love scrolling. I love, you know, a little bit of like that social media inspiration, but I feel like in like controlled and kind of intentional spurts. That's what I like to do. I like sitting down and being like, today I'm going to scroll for a little bit of time. It's not necessarily like, I'm bored, I'm sitting on the toilet, let me just scroll. You know what I mean? It's being more intentional with what you do in your day. I also think one of the really cool things about fiber art in particular is that craftivism is a thing. Now, I also learned about the differences between art and craft and kind of like the sexism and the classism that kind of underpinned all of that. And from there, I learned about craftivism, which is the idea that crafting can be used as a form of social activism, dissent, you know, bring public awareness to something. It was a really, really cool rabbit hole to go down. I might make a separate video about craftivism, like an essay style video about craftivism, if you guys are interested in seeing some examples about how crafting can bring awareness to wonderful things. But people do craft activism, people do charity work. Again, this is kind of like getting into the community. I have found it so almost like, I don't want to say like a revelation, but it feels like hobbies to me have always been like self-indulgent a little bit. Like, okay, I could be doing a million other things to help other people. I could be cleaning up around the house for someone else. I could be making someone a meal. I could be doing work for someone. I could be volunteering. And I feel like hobbies are something you do just for yourself, right? But in this instance, there are plenty of knitters and crocheters. I'm going to lump crocheters into this as well. Plenty of fiber artists who donate their time and their resources and their gift to charitable causes or political causes or just like things that they care about. And don't underestimate the, you know, charitable giving that is just like making your friends and family happy, like your own internal circle. It doesn't necessarily have to be like this big, you know, communal issue about like rescuing puppies or like saving refugees from war. It can be that. And it often is really important stuff, like, you know, again, heavy political activism. But, you know, I do think being able to connect it to a bigger purpose, being able to, I guess, provide a service, provide like a helping hand through this thing that you love that brings you so much joy that then can continue to grow and be something else. I think that is incredibly nourishing to the soul. And it feels good to be like, okay, I can do this thing that helps other people. I can do this thing that contributes to a bigger cause. And it's all like stuff that I enjoy doing and that, you know, fuels me as I'm doing it. I just think that's like amazing. I will also say after knitting, and I've mentioned that I crocheted before, but after knitting in particular, I feel like I have been more aware of my consumption of fabrics, my consumption of chemicals, my consumptions of plastics. Now, this is a touchy subject if you really want to get into it, because there is quite a bit of discourse about acrylic, plastic, yarn treatment, like the eco-friendliness of it all. I don't want to get into it right now all of a sudden, but I will say if you're someone who is wanting to look at being more mindful, wanting to look at being more sustainable, wanting to maybe dip a toe into slower fashion, capsule fashion, being a mindful consumer, kind of like reducing your waste in a very, very approachable sense, knitting might be good. Yes, on the one hand, you are buying stuff, like yarn needs to be produced, like knitting needles need to be produced, there's plastic involved in like, you know, tags and stuff like that. But I will say on the whole, I'm just more aware of certain things. Like I'm looking at tags, I'm considering the way that I'm laundering stuff. I just feel like knitting has made me a more considerate person because again, it's such a slow process that you need to learn how to consider every step in that process. And so for that same reason, that consideration has bled into other parts of my life. And specifically in kind of the impact of living situation, I feel like that has been really important to me. I also think it's just cool to like flex on people and to like make things that people are like amazed that you've made. So obviously we've talked about things like garments. Have you considered home goods? Things like baskets, things like curtains. What about toys? Like being able to knit really, really amazing, sweet plushies for loved ones if you have children, if you have nieces, nephews, like, you know, I would give it to like students, but like if you have like very, very precious little ones in your life, or maybe you are the precious little one in your life and you want to make an emotional support frog, I'm here for you. I think there is something really undeniably special about someone coming up to you and being like, oh my God, I love your blah blah, I love your bonnet, or like, I love your choker, I love your sweater, I love your emotional support frog, where did you get it? And you're just like, oh, I made it myself. I made it. Yeah, actually, I made that. I finished it last week. I have had so many of those conversations where it's just like, oh, yeah, you can touch it, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can like pick it up. Why don't you try it on? I made that myself. Like I learned the skill, and it's not always strangers. Like sometimes it's friends and you just have like a thing to like show people and you're like, oh my God, I made this thing. You want to see it? It is just a cool flex to be like, I can make toys, I can make blankets, I can make baskets, I can make curtains, I can make like whatever. I can make cushions, like car covers, you know, the little steering wheel cover, which actually is illegal, so don't do that. But yeah, there's just like a ton of things you can make, put your personal mark on everything and be like, yeah, that was me. That was me. I like took this string. I took this string that is just like a ball. It's just a ball. It's a flat ball. And then I was able to turn it into something 3D and wearable and wonderful. And like, that is just amazing. I will also say knitting has given me a sense of my internal voice. You're looking at me now, you're looking at like this room and how I'm dressed, and you might be like, that girl knows what she wants and she's able to ask for it. But I feel like generally as a person, I am someone who self-doubts a lot. I'm someone who has a hard time trusting my intuition, trusting what I want in the direction of things. You know, I'm someone who tends to settle, which again, I feel like if you're looking at me, I don't necessarily look like I'm like scared to make decisions for myself or like make decisions that look a little bit different. But I will say actually as a personality facet, that is something I struggle with. And knitting has given me a really small and approachable bite-sized way of dipping into my own preferences, dipping into understanding how to get in touch with myself, understanding my needs, and kind of separating the shoulds from the wants, right? I think we as like a species, as a human race, I think a lot of us struggle with like shoulding all over ourselves. Like we should do this, we should do that, we should want this, we should want that. People like me should do this, like people like me shouldn't do that. People like me can't want this. People like me will never be loved if we do like XYZ. And I think a lot of it is, you know, blown out of proportion. But I also think a lot of it is just conditioned. Like I think we, I guess, put weight on other people's opinions more than our own opinions. And in some instances, maybe that's necessary. But I do think in small doses, it can be really empowering and really joyful to be like, fuck it, I'm gonna make a scarf in this color combination, even if it's like not the recommended one. Even if people think this color combination is ugly, even if, you know, the person next to me said that I shouldn't get it. Like, I think there are little things, there's little parts of rejection that it's been hard for me to understand. Like for instance, if I'm like picking out a lipstick and I'm like, hey, do you think I should do the black one or the red one? And like secretly I want to do the black one. And I'm like, I'm thinking black, what do you think? And someone's like, no, I think that's gonna be too much. It's really easy to be like, you're right, I'm just gonna do the red one. And to kind of like shrink into yourself because you asked for the advice, right? You asked for permission. And I think this is just a small, tiny, tiny way that I've been able to be like, you know, actually, I'm not going to ask. Or if I ask and someone says, do the red, I'm going to do the black because I actually want you to do the black. And I think that is like a priceless kind of thing. Like to be able to be in touch with your own, I don't want to say like conviction because that feels like too strong a word, but to be a little bit more like, yeah, this is like a stupid little thing and it doesn't actually matter, but I'm going to listen to what I want because what I want is actually this. And it's like a tiny act of self-confirmation, a little act of rebellion against like maybe what other people are recommending or other people are asking you to do. And it's not that consequential, but I think little acts of self-trust add up and it creates like a more like self-efficacious person, right? Like that's how I feel. I feel like I've become more self-efficacious through knitting, which is crazy because also you're tackling challenges. I think I mentioned this before, but like it is such a engrossing hobby and it doesn't have to be from the beginning, right? You can start with just the really basic stuff and you don't have to learn at such a crazy pace. You don't have to be someone who like wants to learn all the skills. You can just do what you like to do at like, you know, like you can just make scarves or hats. Like I have a friend who just wants to make hats, right? And that's fine. I'm not saying you have to be like overextending yourself all the time. But I will say, I feel like I have become a more challenge accepting person. Like I'm more willing to take on a challenge, take on something that stretches me a little bit. Whereas before knitting, I don't think like, yeah, I try difficult things, right? Like I try hard things and like I feel like I'm someone who can learn quickly, but I don't like failure. I don't like mistakes. I don't like being in distress, and learning new stuff makes you feel all those things. Like makes you feel in distress, makes you feel powerless, makes you feel like you're stupid, makes you feel like you need help, right? But I think knitting over time, building up like scaffold and like being able to progress through the ladder, you know, as a teacher, like always trying to like make sure that I'm pushing myself just a little bit. I feel like I have become, again, someone who is more in control of like my distress, someone who's more in control of like what I can and can't do, someone who feels like I have a growth mindset all the time because I'm always pushing myself. And I think that is in itself a reason to learn how to knit, right? And then the last thing is hour per hour knitting is one of the more affordable hobbies, one of the most affordable hobbies you can do. You know, save for like the free ones, like going for a walk. But like, what do people do? People are out here like doing restaurant tours. People are out here skiing, doing snow sports. People are out here horseback riding. Am I doing like only the bougie ones? People are out here shopping, like recreationally, just going out on the weekends. You know, going to cafes and like cafe hopping. What about photography? You know, people like learning how to do photography, people getting into fashion. People are, can you tell, people are fishing, okay? People are buying, you know, all kinds of like rare antiques, antiquing, flipping, you know, interior design. Those are all like watches, okay? Test driving cars, biking. What am I don't know hobbies, I'm clearly, but I do feel like hour per hour, you get a lot of enjoyment out of like a ball of yarn, okay? High-end balls of yarn, $20. $30. High-end watch, thousands, okay? Just, they're not the same. They're not the same. One is significantly more affordable than the other. And I feel like if you are someone who is looking for hours and hours of joy, and also yarn is reusable, okay? So if you make a sweater and you don't like it, you can just rip it out. All of those hours of making a sweater, that was fun. You wore the sweater, you take it out, you reknit it, okay? You did a new sweater. It's like so eco-friendly. It's so endlessly giving. It's like the gift that keeps on giving. And then at the end of it, you have like a garment, right? It's like really cool. Or you can sell it, right? Like you can sell the garment, you can gift the garment, you can wear it, you can recycle it, you can like turn it into another project. It's just endless. It's an endless supply of fun. That is all I have for today. I've been yakking. No. What is the word? I'm a talker. I've been talking, I've been blabbing for 30 minutes. I think it's time to go. With that being said, again, the whole point of this video was to like indoctrinate you, to propaganda you into wanting to know how to knit, because ultimately my goal is to form like a little knitting group. And then maybe we can do like Discord or like live knitting sessions. We can be like together doing a little knit along. That's like the ultimate goal, to be like a knitting podcaster girly, to be someone who, I don't know, like leads the way in like being a little bit more of like an off the beaten path, kind of like how can you serve yourself and your creativity in a way that is fun and life affirming and like, you know, good for you, good for you, good for your soul, good for the planet, good for each other. So I hope I've convinced you. Let me know if you have found just one compelling reason to get into knitting in this video. If you have, I am so beyond delightful and happy. I would love to do like a roundup of like beginner patterns. If like more than 5 people have said they're willing to try this, I am going to make a whole video recommending where to start, how to begin, like if any of that is interesting to you, because I just did this. Like I just did this a few months ago. I feel like a lot of knitting content creators have been knitting for a while, and so they kind of are far along from when they just started, whereas I'm like only 4 months away from when I just started. So for me, it's really easy to be like, yeah, I know what I used to get from here to here, because I went from not knowing how to knit to being what is, I think, technically an intermediate knitter, or like an advanced beginner within a few months. So I just feel like I have all the deets, okay? My special interests, like my extreme level of like focus and drilling down into the hobby has allowed me to divulge a lot of technical information on like where to get it, how to find your supplies, how to understand the weights of yarn, like how to do all this stuff. Don't worry, boo, I got you. If you're interested, I would love to have converted at least a few people into trying this. And at the very least, if you're not going to do it, tell me it was compelling. Okay, please, at the very least. Thank you so much for watching the StitchWitch Podcast. Here's to a ton of new content, new creative stuff. I'm so grateful for all of the love and support you guys have given me in the last video. Honestly, I could not say enough positive, gushy things about it. I just feel like all these years I thought I was like talking to the void. But there was clearly a loving audience on the other side of that void, and you guys like me for who I am. I don't think I'm going to be deleting any videos. I have been trying to reply to comments individually, but TLDR, I will try to keep everything up and like drown it out with the new stuff, and hopefully that will be my mitigation strategy from now on. But that is it for me. Please try knitting, give it a try. Spend $20 on some supplies and make yourself a little, not a scarf, I don't recommend a scarf, but make yourself like a little hat and see how it goes. I think it'll be fun. I have not regretted it. Any of my friends who have gotten into knitting have not regretted it. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful cornerstone of my life and a place where I feel like I've become a better person. So with that being said, that is everything for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye now.